Welcome to The Real News. I'm Mark Steiner. Great to have you all with us. While the nation and world are focused on the COVID pandemic, the Trump administration is quietly and blatantly ending environmental regulation and allowing the most dangerous polluting industries to exploit the ocean and our land and all the resources around them, all of which could lead to a worsening climate crisis that we already face and will inevitably increase the environmental damage to the earth. The fox is guarding the henhouse, as they say. At the head of the Environmental Protection Agency is Andrew Wheeler, a former leading lobbyist for the coal industry. The EPA announced they were going to allow polluting industries to govern themselves because during the pandemic, they couldn't send out inspectors. Absurd, but real. Trump announced it was opening the ocean to industrial farming that would cause untold damage to the already damaged ocean. If you look at things like COVID, Ebola, and the other viruses that have erupted because of habitat loss and the melting ice caps, could release even more. All of us face a grave danger unless this madness is stopped. We're joined by Caroline Henderson, senior climate campaigner for Greenpeace USA. She's been with Greenpeace, but before that, she was the Power Shift Network, Sierra Club, 350.org on their climate campaigns, and has run advocacy campaigns for Save the Bay, the ACLU of California, and many others. And it's a pleasure to have you with us, Caroline. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Caroline, let me start with this. The head of the EPA, Andrew Wheeler, had this in a document he sent out when they were saying they were going to unregulate the industries. They wrote, "The EPA is committed to protecting human health and the environment, but recognizes challenges resulting from efforts to protect workers and the public from COVID-19 may directly impact the ability of regulated facilities to meet all federal regulatory requirements. This temporary policy is designed to provide enforcement discretion under current extraordinary conditions while ensuring facility operations continue to protect human health and the environment." So, couched in lovely terms, but what does this really mean, Caroline?
Well, I would say that unfortunately, this pattern of looking to roll back regulations and prioritize polluters over public health is nothing new for the EPA under the Trump administration. This has been an ongoing part of an ongoing effort since Trump took office. So far, the administration has weakened or repealed about 100 environmental rules, and we're only seeing this trend continue with the COVID-19 pandemic. And in turn, we're seeing oil companies and lobbyists looking to exploit this crisis for their own gain to further this rollback agenda. So when Administrator Wheeler says that they're looking to reduce the burden on workers and protect public health, this is just not right. We saw that with this request to waive monitoring and reporting requirements for polluters. That request came directly from the American Petroleum Institute, which is an oil and gas industry lobby group. And they were not required to point to any evidence that that monitoring and reporting would put a burden on public health or on workers. And within 2 days of receiving that letter, the EPA agreed to roll back these requirements. And it's particularly ironic right now, given that we are in a public health crisis, to basically be turning a blind eye to the fossil fuel industry and allowing them to pollute air and drinking water during a public health crisis.
So I'm going to cover a couple of things with you, but you mentioned the API, the American Petroleum Institute. So let me start there and then come back to the other place I was thinking about in terms of what we're really facing here. So when I read the memos that they sent to the Trump administration, and the President Institute, Mike Summers, for our viewers, let me just share this and then we can talk about this. He writes, "The oil and natural gas industry needs to maintain safe and reliable operations, taking into consideration that there may be limited personnel capacity to manage the full scope of the current regulatory requirements." And in addition, then you have his vice president, Frank Marchirola, saying in a separate note that he wanted to see the agency delay requirements for greenhouse gas reporting, provide flexibility on monitoring, sampling, and analysis of drinking water permits, and certain extra delays and deferrals on pollution monitoring. So Let's talk about what this means. I mean, I could hear the argument saying, look, this is temporary. This is only because of COVID-19. If we don't do this, then everything falls apart. But I don't think it takes into account a lot of things, from the crisis in the oil industry itself to who's inside the government from that industry. So let's talk a bit about what this interaction between the API and this administration really means.
The American Petroleum Institute is claiming that they really have workers and public health at heart with this decision, but they haven't provided any evidence to suggest that that's actually the case. And if we look at the broader trend here, the oil and gas industry right now is looking to ram forward permitting and construction for more projects during a public health crisis, but is also looking to roll back regulations. So it's not too hard to connect the dots and see where their motivations really lie here. And the second thing I would point to is that when we see reports linking communities with worse air pollution having higher likelihood of death due to COVID-19 than communities with lower air pollution. And when we look and see that some of the other EPA regulations that have been rolled back could result in greater cases of asthma, emergency room visits, and death, we know that really what the EPA should be prioritizing right now is regulations that protect public health, not polluter handouts.
So before I'm going to get to what we need to do here. I'm really very curious about, for our listeners and viewers, to understand exactly the parameters of what they're trying to do here. I mean, talk a bit about what you understand about the regulations they've already begun deregulating, and what you think that portends.
Speaking about the entire legacy of rollbacks under the Trump administration, it's touched everything from the Endangered Species Act to National Environmental Policy Act to clean water rules. And just in the last few weeks and months during the COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen, as we've been talking about this rollback of pollution monitoring and reporting, we've also seen a rollback of fuel efficiency standards, which could contribute to as many as 18,500 additional premature deaths and 350,000 more respiratory ailments by 2050 compared to the stronger fuel efficiency standards that were finalized under the Obama administration. We've also seen a rollback of coal and mercury pollution requirements from coal and oil power plants. And the EPA themselves projected that those requirements could prevent 130,000 asthma attacks, 5,700 hospital emergency room visits, and up to 11,000 premature deaths each year. And those requirements have been rolled back. So this is part of an ongoing trend, and we can expect to see more of these rollbacks. But what's really devastating here is the potential public health impact, particularly at a time when public health is already a huge concern, and particularly when we're seeing the effects of COVID-19 disproportionately affecting Black communities, Indigenous communities, people of color, and low-income communities. So the EPA is further jeopardizing folks in those communities as well, since they're more likely to be located near coal and oil power plants.
And I mean, it seems to me we're also facing a very difficult moment here. I mean, there were issues under the Obama administrations previous to that, and the environmental movement and others were able to push forward and get some changes made, but now we're really going backwards. So the question I have for you as an environmental activist, and with Greenpeace and with other organizations, is just what the response has to be. I mean, I think people don't, it's because of the way that the nature of our coverage on this, not our necessarily real news, but coverage this in the larger sense, that I don't think people really can understand the import and impact that of what they're doing can have on us. I mean, and I mean that in the sense that I've been working on this piece that shows how Ebola, SARS, and what we face now with COVID, even Lyme disease, are all resulting from loss of habitat and the pollution of our environment and destroying the earth are unleashing the things that we're facing. Be able to make that connection. But so talk about politically where you think this has to go from here.
Certainly. It's really crucial right now that we make sure that the oil and gas industry and the Trump administration does not use this crisis to further jam through and justify rollbacks and giveaways for polluters. But unfortunately, we do see that happening and right now, and Greenpeace is committed to being that voice on Capitol Hill and mobilizing millions of supporters and millions of people around the country to make sure that that our government right now is prioritizing people and workers and not polluters. So for example, in the upcoming stimulus package, making sure that we are bailing out people and workers and providing protections for those on the front line and not giving more blank checks to fossil fuel executives, CEOs, and shareholders.
I mean, maybe if this continues for any length of time, both the pandemic and giving them the ability to deregulate all of these industries, coal and oil and more, maybe it'll be time for like a pandemic demonstration where we stand 6 feet apart. And thousands of us surround the Capitol. I mean, you just can't sit idle while this goes on.
Yeah, and we can't, we're committed to doing what is within our power right now and what is safe and responsible to practice civil dissent and to mobilize, because it's we've been told that the most compassionate and responsible thing we can do right now is to stay home, and that's certainly true. But in the absence of being able to, turn out in droves in the streets, we do need to be calling our members of Congress. We need to be taking action from our homes and finding creative, responsible ways to make sure that our elected officials are answering to us and not to the polluters.
So let me just conclude with this. I want to kind of, as we leave each other today, to really again outline and be very clear about what it is we face if this goes on, if we allow this to happen. I mentioned everything from the ocean industrial farming, which is already going to destroy a battered ocean environment, to allowing coal and gas to do as they will, putting people in charge of, from the coal industry and oil industry, in charge of the interior, in charge of the EPA. I mean, the dangers here are pretty deep and profound. So talk a bit about how you all couch that at Greenpeace.
Yeah, we know that the window is narrowing on our ability to take action at the scale that we need to address the climate crisis and the ecological crises we face. And that's why it's important that right now, as we're responding to a global pandemic, that it's not enough just to go back to business as usual. It's not enough to keep the industries that got us here in the first place, to keep them enjoying the favors that are keeping them afloat. We have to be thinking about building a more just and equitable and sustainable future so that when we emerge out of this crisis, we're better off for it and able to tackle the climate crisis, which is no less urgent than it was before this happened.
Thank you for joining us, and please stay safe and healthy through all of this.
Thank you so much.
And thank you and all the folks at Greenpeace for the work that you do. We look forward to many more conversations as we confront what we confront to make this a better world for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care.
You too. And I'm Mark Steiner here for the Real News Network. And thank you all for joining us. Please let us know what you think, and please stay home, stay healthy, stay safe.
Thanks a lot for watching. Appreciate it. But do us one more solemn favor. Hit the subscribe button below. You know you want to. Stay up on the videos.